from our barracks and operations offices. Those are SPAD 13s, which we were equipped with, which we all wanted to go out on. We were real happy about that. They were a real sturdy airplane, but we had all kinds of trouble with the motors. For instance, one time I went up to check out my plane, and everything was fine, so I started to come down. I started down to come into land and throttle down, but the engine wouldn't throttle any further than about 900 RPMs. Well, 900 RPMs were too fast to land and too slow to maintain altitude. So what do you do in a case like that? Well, I kept working the magnetos, shutting them off and turning them on, and came in that way, and finally got down. I got down on the ground and only to have a wheel collapse, which had nothing to do with the other trouble. Turned over on my back, and this oil tank right next to me was dripping hot oil right past my right ear. That's why I have trouble with this thing, I guess. One of the reasons. Magnetos. Do you guys know what a magneto is? Yeah. Well, we had more trouble with magnetos. In fact, one time on a patrol, the magneto came clear off the base it was tied onto, and I couldn't use it at all. Of course, the other magneto kept the motor running, but you'd be in an awful lot of trouble if you ever got jumped by some Germans. But by this time we were on the... there's another picture of the lineup at Foucault at Lille-en-Barrois. Now there's our gunnery crew. They loaded our guns with the proper ammunition. Every other bullet was an armor-piercing bullet, and the one on both sides, one was an incendiary and the other was a tracer. And they did a funny thing when we first got started. They gave us a slip of paper which said, "You are directed not to use an incendiary bullet on anything but balloons." Well, how they expected us to take those guns apart in the air and take the incendiary bullets out, I never could figure out. But those were some of the orders. Another problem we had was somebody up in headquarters, we had a lot of smart guys up there, decided that it was a thing to do to put a bomb rack under the SPAD's fuselage and carry 4 20-pound bombs. Well, when you added 80 pounds to the weight of the plane, plus the wind resistance from the bomb rack and the bombs, it really cut down your maneuverability plenty. But the big brass said it should be done, so we did. If you go through the museum, you see opposite the only SPAD they have out here, one of those bombs. It's a yellow bomb with a 213 squadron on it. I didn't bring one home. I didn't bring that one home, but I did bring another one home. So these bombs, they put on the carriage underneath, and you released them by pulling a wire. Well, sometimes the wire didn't always release them, and one time I went out with my bombs on a patrol to stop and bomb a certain road, and I pulled this wire about 6 or 8 times, and I thought, well, it sure feels a lot better, and came on back to the squadron, and as I went into land, usually your mechanics come out to help you because we had no brakes on these planes, and to turn around was some kind of tough job. They'd come out and grab hold of a wing and help to turn around. Nobody came out. I looked back at where everybody usually is, nobody. The place was deserted. So I finally got it turned around and taxied back to the line And finally I shut the motor down, and then I saw a couple of heads looking out from around back of the hangar. These guys came out, and here I had all 4 bombs still hanging on the plane. We sent out to Strasse, the Champlain-Montmorency-La-Tour road. I never will forget this, which was a road that was packed with German retreating troops. Horses, trucks, motorcycles, automobiles, and mostly foot soldiers. We drove on this road, and it was really a mess. If we had a forced landing there, I'm sure they would have cut our hearts out, and I wouldn't blame them. But the Germans did have some defense. They had machine guns off in the woods next to the road. They would fire at us as I was coming down. I can remember very well thinking that these bullets were going through the guy ahead of me. And the guy behind me said the same thing about me. Well, as a matter of fact, we did get some bullets in the plane, but it didn't hit any of us, fortunately, or hit a vulnerable place. Well, we made a couple of passes at this road, and the confusion was just something awful. Then I pulled up to join up again to go on back to the squadron, and I couldn't find anybody. The sky was a complete blank. So I circled around a while. Finally, I saw 2 planes over toward the German lines, or even further inside the German lines. And I thought, well, that's some of our gang. So I went over to meet them. And before I realized it, and I was too close, I realized they were 2 Fokker, German Fokker planes. The Fokker D7, which is a tough airplane. Well, here I was, coming right toward them. So what do you do? So I was really scared on this one. I went right between these 2 guys. They were flying, one at one altitude, one at the other. I came in between. I could see one German looking up at me, the other one looking down at me. I could just tell they were licking their lips, saying, "Oh, there's our duck soup." Well, we did a lot of maneuvering around, and they must have been either awfully dumb or awfully new, because they kept getting in each other's way, and gave me a chance to do what they call a renversement. And I was going the wrong direction of it. I was going further into Germany. So I did a renversement, which is a turnover, turns you around real quick. And that kind of threw them off. So I poured the coal on the motor, and the motor ran just fine that day. Fortunately, that's one reason I'm still here. And believe it or not, that was Friday the 13th of September. Don't ever let anybody tell you Friday the 13th is an unlucky day. Did you ever fly an airplane in the pea soup with no instruments? Some of you pilots, well, I don't recommend it, but every once in a while we had to do that. And one time, our commanding officer came out and said, "I'm sorry, but they've called up and said they're Germans that are bothering our troops up on the front line. They want somebody to go out and chase them off." Well, the fog was right down on the ground. There weren't even any birds flying. So like a darn fool, I, among others, volunteered to go up and see. So as soon as we left the ground, couldn't see a thing. Fortunately, the fog wasn't too thick. But the only way you can maneuver in that case, if you're in an open cockpit, if your RPMs went up, you knew you were pointed down. If they went down, you knew you were pointed up. If you felt the wind hit you on this side, you knew you were tipping this way, and the same on the other side. That's the way I got up, and I flew around above the fog, waiting for somebody else to come up. And nobody did. I just went up there for 10 or 15 minutes. I thought, well, what the heck's happened to all these guys? So I looked up toward the front, and it was just as foggy up there as it was where I was. So I thought, well, there's no use going up there. So I started down. That's where the trouble started. The fog was thin. I finally got enveloped in it and started down as slow as I could. All of a sudden, here was a tree right in front of me. Well, I zoomed over the tree, then there was another one. And I looked down, and here I was right alongside a road. Well, I kept hopping over trees. I thought, well, this road must go someplace. So I hopped over the trees, and all of a sudden I saw an aerodrome, on the other side of the road. It flitted by, and I lost it. So I pulled around, and it was the first pursuit group. So I knew some of the guys in there, and I knew Eddie Rickenbacker went up, and Eddie said, "What in the devil are you doing flying on a day like this?" Well, it was a little hard to explain. When I broke a wheel when I came into land, I said, "Could you get your boys to put a new wheel on my plane?" He said, "Sure, we'll take care of it." So I stayed there the rest of the morning, had lunch with them, and took off the afternoon, got back home again. But those are just some of the little problems. Now today, with your sophisticated aircraft, you couldn't possibly do those kind of things, but you have one advantage over us that we didn't have. We had no parachutes, and we had to stay with the airplane. Once you got off the ground, you were stuck. So we had to make the best of it.